Aloha, listeners and viewers. Welcome to Intermission, a conversation series between artists. Intermission is the Hawaii Chamber Music Festival's exclusive online channel with Broadcast Hawaii. I'm your host, Chris Yick, the founder of the festival, and today we have special guest, Miss Annie Fullard, with us. Annie Fullard is a member, or one of the founding members actually, of the Cavani String Quartet, and she's been a great mentor for me at my alma mater now, the Robert McDuffie Center for Strings, where she was a chamber coach, and she really pushed bass players especially to do crazy things. But today we wanted to get in with her and sort of talk about her story, how she's been dealing with COVID and just everything all about Annie. So Annie, how are you doing?
Well, first of all, just a moment about Chris. I'm just so proud of you and your energy. It's really inspiring what you're doing,
Thank
both
you.
in Hawaii, like really pushing the chamber music there, supporting local artists, bringing in people. And by the way, I'm available anytime. And taking the time out right now to surf in my backyard in Ohio. There's a big surfing. Totally kidding. But anyway, in all seriousness, I think it's marvelous how you have taken your musical aspirations and kind of created a wonderful Venn diagram, if you will, of incredible projects that people are really excited about. So, that's going to continue. I'm
Thank
very
you.
about it. So,
Thank you. Well, I'm sad that I guess the semester got cut off short. We had some exciting chamber music. We had, you assigned me Bartok violin duos for two basses. Like,
yes.
why? What was the reasoning behind that?
Well, the theme of the semester, and is just a personal and maybe a kind of teaching technique. I love to
Hmm.
have themes that we can draw upon so that all the ensembles can learn from each other.
Hmm.
So this semester happened to be early 20th century composers. So we had a variety from every continent. And it seemed perfect with you and your bass partner, Reed Tucker, who are both wonderful players. That the Bartok duos, written originally for two violins, but have been transcribed for a number of different instruments, would be a perfect vehicle for you. They're rhythmically complex, they're beautiful pieces, and they're significant. And even in this time, they're significant
Hmm.
because what those composers, we did Bartok, Prokofiev, Gina Stara, Barber, probably leaving somebody out. But anyway, what a composer like Bartok went through, the
Hmm.
isolation, the concern for his fellow human beings during both world wars, is not unlike, and also this uncertain future for musicians, for
Sure.
artists, against all odds. And he persevered by creating something. So
Yeah.
that's the idea, to explore the early 21st century in chamber music. Little did I know that we were going to end up with this crazy and scary, threatening disease.
Sure. Absolutely.
Have to really reimagine how to connect with each other.
Hmm.
So, you know, it worked well to use the music as a vehicle for discovering more about the composer, doing the kinds of
Hmm.
research that we never get a chance to do in a coaching, because I'm usually jumping around, getting everybody to cue and conduct and
Hmm.
that kind of
Hmm.
thing. So, and then finally, your project, which was to transcribe a couple duos for two basses, because I think
Sure.
that they are a viable um, uh, piece of repertoire, both for the formal concert stage and for bass education. So,
Absolutely.
yeah, but it's fun to have a theme to work on. And if you were coming back, it was going to be something that was Beethoven centric. So we'll see. Done Schubert quintet with bass and everything else. So
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. So, Annie, you're you have a lot of energy when you coach and do all these things with music related. I mean, since March though, it's everything's just poof, right? It's just gone. How have you like coped with that? I mean, you're quarantining with your family, which I'm sure it's great to spend more time, but
Yeah.
how are your feelings of just like not being on the road all the time, not coming to coachings, or not doing this, not doing that? You know, even like summer performances that were lined up. How are
Yeah.
you dealing with, I guess, the sadness of that?
Um, well, the worst part for me is, is not being with people in person.
Hmm.
The energy of music making, of teaching, of performing comes from being inspired by other human beings who are in the room.
Yeah.
And so uh, the part of this epidemic that has forced us, and it's because we want to be safe and healthy,
Hmm.
but to be separated, I think that's been, it's just weird. So I'm
Yeah.
calling it weird formata. I am
Hmm.
a glasses half full person.
Sure.
So I believe that at the end of this situation, there will be more music making and more, perhaps because we've had to deal with the technological aspects of this, there might be even more creative ways of
Sure.
intersecting, but we certainly won't take it for granted when we can
Hmm.
get back on a concert stage, and particularly when we have people to play for in person. It really that's kind of where I get the energy, is from
Hmm.
working with you all, from the there's and I've been making a lot of weird kinds of cookies with, and actually I'm lucky. I have a safe and a beautiful place to be,
Hmm.
that I'm able to get out and take walks. The Cleveland musical community is amazing.
Hmm.
So there are front porch concerts going on, and my son is here, and my surrogate daughter who also plays violin. So we're trying to get creative with being motivated by finding ways to maybe help other people to share music
Sure.
with them. I mean, music is not a vaccine, but
Hmm.
it's certainly a powerful connecting tool. It's providing solace for people who are in the hospital.
Yeah,
Uh,
absolutely.
Musicians are finding ways to use it, and I really have to believe in deep down that somehow uh, music, particularly the kind of music that we are
Hmm.
playing with acoustic instruments, can maybe even save lives. Maybe for people who are suffering from depression, who use an instrument to
Hmm.
motivate themselves, maybe people who are listening to music. I hope a lot of people are listening to Beethoven, because
Yeah.
that man suffered in his life, and went through serious depression
Hmm.
and used his art to come out of it. So there's a lot of inspiration we can take from the past and use that towards dealing with the present and the future. But yeah, I am
Yeah, definitely, definitely.
to stay optimistic and also somewhat realistic, although that's really not my style.
No, no, absolutely. No, I mean, you mentioned how, you know, this uncertainty and time of discouragement, but it's most artists that I've talked to, at least in the first few episodes, I always ask like, do you think art and music will be more appreciated after this? But I guess another aspect of it is, do you think artists are finally realizing what they were doing? Essentially, some of us were just taking it for granted, because we all have had concerts where we were just like, playing the same rep, or I don't want to do this gig, or even like, oh, I'm playing at a wedding, whatever. But now it's like when those things are missing, we actually really miss performing, whether it's like the small outdoor venue or the big concert hall. Like, what do you think? Have you had that same feeling with
um,
performing, or?
well, I mean, maybe it's where I am in my life, but I don't take any performing or teaching or opportunity for granted,
Hmm.
uh, because even if it's a wedding, that's part of somebody's greatest day of the life.
Sure.
It's gonna sound good, but I know exactly what you mean. And it does bring up a very large question about art for art's sake. And in this country, particularly, I think we have a argument, not an argument, but a feeling of friction between, but you've got to understand that you are also have to have, you can't survive on the molecules of goodness. You have to figure out a way to have a process for producing a living wage that allows you to function in society.
Absolutely.
That's the struggle that we often come up with. But I always feel like when you look at the statistics, it's artists who manage, because we represent the emotional quality, we represent living history, that we are the ones that seem to survive through these crises with ourselves intact, and even sometimes through the suffering. We find ways of dealing with it. We reach out to people that we hadn't ordinarily.
Yeah, definitely.
You make a good point. There are people doing Zoom. I'm kind of done with the Zoom, but anyway, zooming away. We're zoom.
Sure.
But that probably would have never contacted each other. And forming relationships and bonds because we're sharing a same a feeling. And that's actually, to me, that's what chamber music is about. It's connecting over a bigger picture, finding synchronized rhythm, helping each other, supporting each other, all while having an individual voice. And I actually think that in the end will help us network financially and figure out ways to help provide for some of us who aren't able to, we can help each other out. It's the way it should function.
Definitely. I think it's actually interesting too, because in some ways, COVID has made musicians really step out of their comfort zone for some people. Like we're talking about, because this technology, Zoom, Skype, FaceTime, whatever platform you use, it's not new. Like it's always been out there, but I guess the music profession really hasn't sort of seen a reason to use it. And now that it's kind of been like, oh, here's your medicine, you got to take it. It's like now, but I think now people are realizing, wow, our music can be so much more accessible, and it's been here all along. So maybe there is some truth or some goodness that's coming out of this experience. But you also mentioned like making a living wage as a musician. Pre-COVID, one would just argue, oh, as long as you have an orchestra job, you're fine. But now, like, is that the case? Because I mean, you're hearing about a lot of orchestras just suspending the season, or maybe even some of them are just writing off 2020 and 2021. And it just only seems like maybe if you're not a university or a bit large institution kind of musician, you're not in the education department, then you're not going to be, in a sustainable place. You're not going to be financially okay. I mean, do you think it's now time for musicians to realize they have to wear multiple hats like you and then be able to just navigate through that? Or what do you think?
That's a really huge question. I'm probably not an authority. I can speak from sort of a couple of different perspectives.
Sure.
One, that you mentioned the technology. We have continued and do continue to teach private lessons and make do with the technology. That can work. Chamber music as an art form, the realism of responding and reflecting and spontaneous music making can't happen unless you're all in the same room together.
Yeah.
But people are using, for students particularly, these programs where you can, listen to each other and tape over. And that's great, that's a temporary solution. But my evil plan is that chamber music is the viable way for us to continue as performing artists, because as we use the safety rules and what the requirements from the CDC or from the organizations that we trust, from scientists and doctors, and they say things like, okay, you can have up to 10 people in a room, you need to maintain a certain distance. To me, that just says, oh, that's a Mendelssohn octet and a coach. Well, that's 9, but who's counting? Sure. I'm not good at counting. But you can have a string quintet or quartet, a woodwind quintet, a brass quintet, or any musical ensemble, a vocal quartet. And perhaps chamber music as an actual entity is going to maybe take the forefront for, as an art form, to continue music performance. Then the other thing is people need to be local. Like you, for instance, really tapped into the need in Hawaii to have a viable chamber music performing organization celebrate local artists. So right now, even as simple as playing in your front yard, playing on your porch, talk to your neighbors, you'll find that more people are really interested in coming to hear you play, or interested in putting on their own backyard concert. And I'm not just saying for classical music, for any kind of music. People are craving it. And you can do things, just because it's small doesn't mean that it's not great. So that artists need to look in their own, the traveling is going to be difficult, and we have to figure out how we're going to deal with that. But maybe looking in your own backyard at senior centers, schools, community venues, and there are lots of granting organizations for these kinds of projects. And who knows who you meet just in your own neighborhood. So I think, who knows what could develop from a more local performing arts world, and from more chamber music.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think what the beauty of chamber music as well is, like you said, like, it doesn't need the traditional concert hall setting. Like, we can perform essentially anywhere and everywhere. And that's what I've noticed a lot too. Like, some of the things that my festival has done, we've even done performances in like restaurants, you know, or even like like you said, senior centers. It doesn't have to be your typical 400 seater hall. This is where we have to play. This is the only place we can play. La la la. But now let's dive into just chamber music. I mean, you're very, very passionate about chamber music, and it's been wonderful the last 4 years working with you. And there's one thing I've always been curious about. You know, every time you've assigned bass players the chamber rep, for example, you've given us quite difficult pieces. But now that I look back, it seems like there's something that you see in us that maybe we don't even realize. Like, maybe there is this, we're better than what we say we are. We're better than how we think we are. And just maybe you see like this untapped virtuosity in all of us. I mean, how is your approach when you're teaching chamber music?
Well, the larger picture, people think of chamber music a little bit, you know, and classical musicians are the worst. When you say chamber music to someone, I think even the image that comes to mind is, you know, for people, I won't get gender centric right now, but for perhaps older people playing in a string quartet. That is not at all what myself and the philosophy of my quartet, my current colleagues, and many people in the world of chamber music, that is not how we view it. Chamber music is a microcosm of, you know, the best of, you know, creating the best team. It's about the team. If you can create teamwork, then you have empathy and you have connection. That can be applied to any group of individuals. Then top that off with great art. So when I'm assigning a piece to you as a bass player, I'm not looking at your instrument. I'm looking at you as a musician and as an artist. And as a student, I want to give you the experience with a great work of art that will teach you so much. Even if I was never in the room jumping around, that music, the Brahms sextets and Arensky, a Schubert quintet, jazz pieces that are maybe transcribed, but
Eyeglass duet.
Duo. I mean, the standard repertoire, which is not always, and I'm sure some people would say, well, why do that? But I don't think that the instrument should limit the artistic experience, and that you're there to learn and have an opportunity. Plus, the idea of, sort of desegregating bass players from just working on your orchestral excerpts, but coming in to work with really highly motivated violinists and violists and cellists, and you bond with each other. And I think that could make you actually a much more tremendous asset to any orchestra section. The ability to cue and lead and take responsibility and know a score.
Absolutely.
So chamber music has a very small definition, but it's a huge way of looking at the world and living in the world. And I've seen the results of how people have really transformed their whole point of view in relating to other human beings by playing chamber music and relating to the composer and the history. There's just so much. It's endless. Sure. That's yes. Does that? I don't know if I answered your question.
No, absolutely. So now let's dive into like where does this passion for your chamber music come? I mean, you're right now at the McDuffie Center as a chamber coach. You have your own quartet, and I've seen, you've also been in Hawaii recently, and also your name has popped up in a lot of these places that for music schools where you're just coming in and giving coachings with your quartet or individually. Take us through your journey for how you got into music. I mean, I'm sure it didn't just go from here to be like, hey, like I'm doing all this. What was your inspiration behind the violin?
Well, that's another great thing about being a musician is the amount of people that become mentors and influences, and the amount of learning that you do in so many different ways, your peers, your colleagues, your teachers. So along the way, I have been, I think, just incredibly lucky. I have just, I don't know how, but I've been incredibly lucky to, first of all, play with amazing colleagues from the original 4 members of the Cavani Quartet to the 25 years with the Mary Kirsten Mari. And then now my new colleagues who, pressing the refresh button, Kyle, Catherine, and Eric. And, I'm just really always excited about what my colleagues bring to the rehearsal process and bring to the performance process. And I'm humble enough to know that, I can become better by learning from them. In terms of formative experiences, I think everyone has, sort of a disaster experience musically, and either that can sort of put the kibosh on your inspiration, or it can help you to realize, wow, what if? And then you have another experience when you're really young that is just like such a turn on, and you think, how can anybody not want to do this? So both of those simultaneously at a summer music camp, which was run by a person who really challenged the young musicians. We played Schoenberg, Perrault Lunaire. I did the Trout Quintet, Brahms Piano Quintet. I mean, repertoire that was beyond my technical and musical even scope at that point.
Sure.
I was pretty young, and yet somehow it triggered something for me in the best way of, wow, if this is what it means to be a musician, like this is what my instrument can be a part of, then sign me up. I mean, sign me up. Like, this is fun. You get to hang out with people, you talk about stuff, people coach you, you get to perform, like the whole situation. And the music is just so, like, I don't know, it's just like rock and roll, man. Like, man, it just kind of moves you. And if you allow it to, and that was it. And then I sort of, again, focused on where I could go and who to work with that would be a role model in terms of chamber music making, in terms of string quartet playing. And I found peers that love to read chamber music, and colleagues and teachers that supported that. The Cleveland Quartet, Juilliard Quartet, even though we didn't study with them directly, they were always role models.
Sure.
They're kind of curiosity, like, no fear, man, just, you know, try stuff.
Absolutely.
Tokyo Quartet, and, you know, we did the usual competitions and whatnot. And then when we began to change roles and began to perform and also teach, that just added another dimension of how exciting this is to help people discover and fall in love with music and also the art form. So I don't know, there's a lot of people that I could name, but
sure.
Yeah, just
you mentioned you mentioned all these big names: Cleveland Quartet, you know, Tokyo Quartet, Juilliard Quartet. Was there a concert growing up that really just like changed your life and you were just like, wow? I mean, you say like all of this contributed to, this is what you want to do, but you know, I've heard stories from others where it's just like, Itzhak Perlman came to play, I was there, that changed my life. Was there that kind of moment for you?
Yes, actually. Okay, so we're on the Zoom. Hang on a second. It's good. You're in my totally disorganized mess of an office. That's on my list. It's probably not going to happen, but so behind here, this is a concert I went to. I have the poster. So this is the Quartet at Earlham College, where they played on the series. I don't know if you can see. They signed the poster. This is 1979, and I'm not going to say how.
$2 tickets.
They all signed: Earl Carless, Joel Krosnick, Sam Rhodes, Robert Mann. And I remember they played a Haydn Quartet, Debussy Quartet, and Schoenberg, I believe. Wow. And it was breathtaking to me. I just couldn't believe the sound and the interaction and how I felt like I walked in one way and walked out differently.
Sure.
And, you know, I didn't sit there and go, oh, I want to play in a string quartet. It wasn't that at all. It was, wow, this is really powerful. This is a moment of transformation, and it just was incredible. And so I totally forgot about this poster, but yes, that's like was a profound influence for me. So
absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, you know, you bring up how when you went to that concert, you walked in and then afterwards you felt completely different. And I think earlier we talked about how, musicians can actually, or music in general can be of healing. Do you think, like, in some ways, artists, musicians, we play a huge voice in the community? Like, how can we positively impact our communities then? Like, how can we have concerts and make audience members feel like what you did with the Juilliard Quartet back in 1979?
Well, I think it's all about creating safe spaces for audiences to feel that they can bring their teenager or their child to hear a a concert, you never know. Children are so open to things.
Yes.
If they don't know any better, they tend not to judge, but to respond in a moment. So I am all about education in a broader sense. I believe that artists, particularly classical musicians, need to take all of their performances as seriously as they would if they're going to a competition or going to play on Carnegie Hall stage, and they should get in there and play live music or on the Zoom for young kids. I don't know any other way to do it. It is not rocket science, but music education in the United States, unfortunately, is very ill-funded. Our music teachers out there are suffering trying to create curriculums and do things. There are actually magicians out there. Many of my colleagues in Cleveland, whom I adore, are at the public school, high school level, and they have amazing programs. They should be supported by artists like myself and other performing artists who may go to fancy conservatories and do all of that work. What's it for if you're not out there playing for as many people as possible? It's also a good way when you do these school residencies to make a living. As I said, there's grant monies, there's resources from parent-teacher organizations, but I think when you get in front of young people and you have a really well-constructed idea of what you want to impart, and you're in love with your instrument and you're in love with the music, you can really offer an experience that might change somebody's life. And I think the more artists in the world, the better. I mean, remember, we're talking about all genres here. And there are aspects of the music business that make huge, huge amounts of money. It just depends on how many people you get in front of. So, but that shouldn't be the goal. The goal should be to share your own sense of pride in your work, the discipline, and the love of the music with as many audiences as possible. And if you build that, then you can start to figure out how to use capitalism to your advantage.
Sure. Well, you bring up a good point. I mean, that seems like one way to make music just more accessible, getting in front of kids, getting in front of these communities. But I think there's an unwritten reality, right, that essentially becoming a classical musician has a lot of financial means to it, right? Because people get intimidated. I'm sure you notice in outreach performances, they ask, how much is your violin worth? How much is your bow worth? Or how much are you paying for lesson? How many years have you been playing? When they hear those kind of things, essentially, aren't we kind of putting some intimidation into the kids? Like, how do we break that barrier of classical music is a luxury good to classical music can be for everyone?
Well, I think, again, it has to do with a sort of broader approach to education, and for classical musicians, not to just talk about, the specifics of, here's the E string, but read your audience, know your audience, and build your audience so that they feel safe to listen to whatever it is that you want to play.
Sure.
And then I think asking for help, there are many both private and individuals and corporate individuals that find music on many different levels. It could be like therapeutic for their office. It can be how to work as a team, how to rebuild a corporate structure so it's not top down but bottom up. There's so many aspects. The discipline that it takes to repeat something over and over again to build your technique. So there are lots of ways that musicians can interface with the world. An instrument, a bass or a violin, can anywhere from what would be an enormous amount for most people, like $5,000 to $5 million.
$1 million, yeah, exactly.
So, you know, this is where we need to ask for help, find our community, help people understand that these instruments are living history, also support new makers, you know. And there are so many violin shops, I can speak only from the string angle, who are willing to help young kids who may not have the means, so they can, you know, rent an instrument, or you can, they'll give schools instruments. There's lots of programs that way.
Sure.
And if not, sometimes it's just a matter of asking. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, you mentioned earlier about how, like, these corporations, they might use music for teamwork. And I think that's interesting, because do you think musicians should sort of realize that our profession really relates to other professions? Like, a big thing that we did maybe 2 years ago was the Mercer basketball collaboration.
Oh yeah.
I think that was a tremendous example of teamwork, demonstrating our teamwork, and then them demonstrating their teamwork to us. Like, do you think there are these these unwritten relationships between professions that can benefit both sides?
I think people would be shocked, particularly in chamber music, and I'll just throw this out there. My quartet developed a seminar that we do for business schools, and I sort of adapted that for the basketball team program we did, and that Bobby was so Mr. McDuffie really saw this correlation between at every level, practicing, the discipline, the repetition, the team, the performance anxiety.
Sure.
But the bottom line for me personally is the collaborative aspect. So we created something called the Art of Collaboration, which we use as a teaching tool for young ensembles, for collegiate conservatory ensembles, for older ensembles, which is to help create a healthy environment so that everybody feels like their individual voice is heard. And at the time, you're working towards a greater goal as a group. So this is now a book, and it's chamber music rehearsal techniques and team building, but it relates to every aspect of human interaction. So, and music is a vehicle for that. And people are always shocked to see how that works together. And, but they also are happy when they come to some understanding of things that we can relate to together. So. Sure.
Well, how do you sort of change the dialogue when you're talking to these other professions? Because I feel we can't be presumptuous when we're saying, like, oh, you just have to match bow speeds. Like, how do you translate something like that to a corporate office? Like, what kind of words do you use to make them really get what we're doing in their field?
Well, you know, that's a really good question. Maybe the best example I can give is that we talk specifically about some techniques that are very much involve string playing, moving together, or actually music making, moving together to feel rhythm, learning how to cue. Now, that's not something you are going to do in your daily business life. But we lead to a technique that at some point was given a name, which is called Live, Breathe, and Die. And the idea is metaphorical, that your ego goes away or dies in service of your listening to another colleague. And we put that into a specific demonstration using Happy Birthday. And we have individuals come up, never played an instrument in their life, and they end up singing Happy Birthday together by using this technique. It's mirroring and responding and reflecting, and really live, breathe, and die for each other. And they, you know, end up singing Happy Birthday together. These are four individuals that never met each other before. or who may not have worked together, but they're going for a greater goal and responding to each other, and then they understand the kind of listening that goes, that's what musicians do all the time. And so there's a kind of aha moment. And perhaps if I'm in a meeting with another individual and I really listen to the point of, just losing myself, I really try to understand what they're saying, that maybe in some small way I can adjust my point of view to be more synchronous. Or at least, and if everybody's doing that, you come to some sort of adjustment in point of view. It has to do with tone of voice and body language and attitude before you go in. There are a lot of, human beings are complex and stubborn.
Absolutely.
But if you use a few techniques like a chamber musician, you can get a lot done.
Absolutely. And let's sort of recap this then. You throughout your career, you've done a lot of performing, a lot of teaching. Does one bring you more fulfillment than the other, or is it just like both parts just come together and give you so much satisfaction? Because I've heard just from a teaching aspect, and this is what I've talked to other artists in previous episodes, it's like once you're in that pedagogical kind of world, it's just you feel so much more success and more fulfilling when you're seeing your student or the person you've mentored just thrive, do so well.
Yeah.
But how are your feelings? You work with so many groups throughout the year, right?
I get very excited when ensembles make a breakthrough, particularly when they start to really listen and lead together. You know how I am. When everybody's really responding and people have prepared themselves, taken the time, it involves individual preparation. You don't just walk in and do this. And I say that it's been taken seriously. Then I get inspired in my own work. So it makes me nervous too, because I'm like, I have to, I can talk the talk, but I have to walk the walk too. So it actually, I feel like I've become better at both articulating ideas to help students to translate from where the student might be, what their fears might be, and taking that, to a new level and finding what they might have inside that they just didn't realize. And trying to bring that out through the music. And then, taking that as inspiration to work towards things myself and projects, learning, and but I have to say, I still am, able to vibrate sort of. It's a little slow now, but no, and I'm planning, we're doing a Beethoven cycle, really innovative Beethoven cycle, interspersed with living composers like Gabby Lane Frank and Michi Wianco, and awesome people who are writing music for us. So we have big performance projects, and I have equal love and devotion to those as I do to teaching, and I actually don't see them as separate. They help each other. So, and I love hanging out with the students.
Sure. Well, I think there's another aspect to talk about then, where you've had a stellar performing career, but then when you're teaching, obviously you're mentoring the kid and you're giving them what, from your experience, what could be best for them. But have you had those moments where you see a student do something or a group do something, and you're like, wow, I didn't realize you could do that, and then you apply it to yourself afterwards? Like, do you have those kind of reciprocating learning relationships?
Yes, absolutely. When I observe an individual either conquer a fear or do something really extraordinary, or come up with an idea that maybe I didn't think about before, or have a different, viewing it from a different lens.
Sure.
And as a teacher, you really have to be open to that. I think it's reciprocal.
Sure.
That's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing. So, and students have much better fingerings than I do. So I'm often like, really? You do that? Wow. So, but yes, it's a very reciprocal.
So what about the relationship of performing on stage with your student, your group? Like how does that experience feel to you?
Oh, I love doing that, as you know. And that is a big part of the McDuffie Center. And our wonderful director and my colleague and friend, Amy Schwartz-Moretti, is a real believer in offering students, a very high level performing experience, putting you guys on the spot, having you work with major artists like Larry Dutton from the Emerson Quartet and Sinyan Wang and all kinds of amazing artists that come in that Amy brings in. And I think, those experiences really have an impact on the students. But it's not just one way, because you bring a fresh perspective, and there's that spontaneous music making in the moment that happens, and it's really fun.
Sure.
Fun.
Wow.
Do you remember Larry Dutton having a fit, though, at a certain who did not have their music organized in a notebook, and it fell all over the floor. So, which is like my favorite thing is, please organize your music so it doesn't fall on the floor. Put it in a notebook. Anyway.
Sure. Wow. So, I mean, Addie, it seems like you've had lots of wonderful experiences and memories. So, I guess what I'm going to ask is, what happens now? I mean, you've been an incredible teacher, incredible mentor to these students. You've had everything you could dream for in a performing career. So, at this stage, what's next? I mean, is this how you're happy with everything, or you're always going to pursue more? What is your curiosity telling you?
Well, my curiosity is telling me that I have to keep, energy going to organize projects that bring performances into all audiences, and that that takes a lot of work, but it is often funded well, and it always results in a tremendous artistic experience of playing for maybe an audience that you didn't expect to, as opposed to the concert hall. And there's also looking forward to the joy of going back into a beautiful concert hall. We have many in Cleveland, for instance, Severance Hall, which I hope we were planning to end our Beethoven cycle in Severance Hall.
Wow.
With all these students on stage with us playing, high school students from community string programs, and we were going to play Beethoven. I don't know if that's going to happen this year, but I hope it will happen again. And that's a different feeling, of it's just a reverence for the music, I think. To play in a concert hall and have that quiet surrounding just these beautiful works of art. That's another way to enjoy music and to set goals for yourself. But so projects that are theme related, repertoire projects with the students at Mercer. I know that I think we're going to start an actual organized curriculum-based program for going into the Macon schools. That's something that's been on my mind for a long time. for all the chamber music groups. So we're going to get that started. And there's lots to do. And I haven't played all the Haydn quartets. There's 68 of them. So I'm going to have a really good doctor. Last that long. But yeah, there's a lot of wonderful music to learn. And as I work on this book, I'm learning more about what I need to learn. So
absolutely,
that's really inspiring too. And seeing possibly if chamber music as a vehicle for school systems heading into the next fall might, maybe I can help support the pedagogy of how to help teachers deal with small ensemble playing. So there's lots going on. And then there's the trip to Hawaii and surfing competition, which I'm going to be in, right?
Yeah, exactly. Well, I guess from what you're saying is, in some ways, your COVID has allowed you to really reflect and think about all these projects that you want to do. But most importantly, it sounds like you're still very artistically motivated. And in a time like this, I have a lot of friends and colleagues. They're moving out of the cities, or they're just in limbo, and this sort of sense of discouragement has just dawned upon them, and they're just thinking, wow, is music even worth it? And even to the aspiring students who are in youth symphony programs with their season canceled, they're just like, wow, maybe music is something I shouldn't pursue because COVID has exposed, big holes in what we do. What kind of words of encouragement can you offer for those doubts?
Well, I can relate to that feeling.
Sure.
It's a little, it's daunting how, especially if you read the news and you let that filter into your psyche. I think first of all, you have to find your personal love of music, just playing some Bach or playing something that you love, maybe connect with your teachers, with your mentors. This is the great thing about the internet, is that, reach out to people. I mean, if somebody's feeling like that, call me. I'm here, we'll hang.
Sure.
And then I find great inspiration from composers. I mean, for instance, it happens to be his birthday year, but Beethoven was in such a state of physical disarray, and he was on this cusp of being, one of the most famous musicians and performers. He couldn't hear. He felt terrible. Your stomach aches and headaches and things that none of us would tolerate. And he came to a point where he said, why is this worth going on?
Sure.
And then he said to himself, because there's more that I have to create. There's some art in me, and art is going to be this is with a capital A, that's going to be my muse. I know it's there, and I'm going to reach for it. And it's a struggle, and, personally, financially, he had no money, but that energy brought people around him together to support him. And he had his music performed, and people understood. So don't forget that, that there's a lot of compassion out there, and more than ever, we need to find that. And I believe music is one of the connecting tools where language fails us. Sure. And with all the horrible things that are going on right now, dealing with what's happened, today in Minneapolis with the murder of a gentleman, we have to get it together. We have to move to a new plateau of the way we look at each other. And instead of looking at the just what's at the top. We have to look inside. I think we'd find a lot we could share. And one of the best ways I know of to do that is music.
Sure. So would you say in some ways the other way to look at it is, the world needs music now more than ever in the way things are, right? So I guess to slowly wrap things up, when COVID is over and let's say you had to tell the story of everything from COVID-19 through a concert program, what would you program?
Oh, that's such a great question, Chris. Wow. I think that I would want to include, it would be chamber music, but I think I'd want to include vocal chamber music, woodwinds, brass, string quartet. I'd like to show the musical world.
Sure.
And I'd like to be more, inclusive of people from all walks of life. I think certainly there would have to be some Beethoven.
Absolutely.
Because of what his music stands for to people. Even if they've never heard of Beethoven, there's something there that's so human that people can relate to.
Yeah, definitely.
But if it were me, really, I would sit down with everybody and say, what do you guys want to play? And then see what came out of, one thing we've learned is we have to depend on each other. We really do, to stay safe and healthy, and also to move forward economically and spiritually. So, working together, I don't know, it'd be fun to create a program. There's so much great music. So maybe Schubert.
Any specific pieces?
Yes.
Well, I mean, a lot of the people that I've talked to, they're just like, oh, when this is all over, everybody's just going to play Beethoven 9. Like, that's it, Beethoven 9. And
that's nice too.
But it just, a lot of people are also criticizing that because they're saying like, but if we have to follow social distancing, how can we even get that kind of orchestra on stage anymore?
Oh, no, it has to be chamber music on every street. That's what I would say. Like everybody's playing chamber music, or chamber music in every school would be really great. So.
Well, I guess the final question is, I mean, you expressed this great love for Beethoven. Out of all the Beethoven chamber works, what is your favorite, or which piece is your favorite?
Wow. It varies from time to time, and I can say I think this is true of most musicians who work hard, take their work seriously, that whatever you're working on, you become immersed in, and in a way you fall in love with it. However, I would say that the slow movement of Opus 127, which is one of the quartets he wrote, unfortunately, before he passed away in the last years of his life. And also the Cavatina, which I think I sent you a recording of. The Cavatina was a piece that Beethoven himself said it's one of his only works that made him cry when he listened to it. So, something that has got some hope and transcendence, and also allows us to feel this great pain somehow without pain and suffering through art, which means you don't, get hurt and you don't hurt any other human beings. You can be with it. So yeah, maybe the Cavatina and maybe 127. Okay, that's terrible. I can't. You're making me choose between everything.
No, I mean, that all sounds great. Well, I guess it's time to wrap things up. Annie, this has been an amazing conversation. You've definitely given me, and I hope listeners and viewers will find a lot of insight from this. And for those of you tuning in, I hope you subscribe to Broadcast Hawaii, and we'll be having more episodes just like this. And Annie is just one of many artists we'll be featuring. And at the end of the episode, you'll you'll see a clip of the Cavani Quartet performing a movement of Beethoven. Annie, is there any last words or comments you want to share?
Just get out there, make music. It'll bring you some peace. Might even pay some rent. And make sure you play chamber music.
Awesome. Alrighty. Thank you so much, Annie. I'll see you soon.
Bye, Chris.